Hello travellers, I'm Jo Frances Penn and today I'm here with LK Wilde. Welcome Laura.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on. So, little introduction. Laura is the award-winning author of historical fiction, romance and uplifting feel-good fiction. Her novel Silver Darlings is set on the Northumberland Island of Lindisfarne, also known as Holy Island, here in England, which we're talking about today. So, just to get us started, where is Lindisfarne? How big is it? What makes it so special?
It's quite a famous place considering how small it is. So it is off the coast of Northumberland, which, for those who don't know, it's probably about halfway between Newcastle and Edinburgh. So it's really close to the Scottish border. And it's a tidal island, so you can get across twice a day. There's a road to drive across, and it's about 8 or 9 miles round. And there's a population about 150. So you've got a very small village in one tiny corner of the island, and then a big nature reserve. But it's got quite a important historical significance, considering when you look on a map, it's a tiny little pinprick.
It is really, really small. And so you said that 8 or 9 miles, just so people know, so you can easily walk around that.
Yeah.
Like in a day if you were stopping a lot.
Yeah. I'm not sure. There's not a path all the way around, so you'd have to do a bit of scrambling over rocks and things. But yes, you could definitely walk around it.
Yes, as you said, really near the borders. And when I was there, only briefly, which we'll come back to, but on that one side you're looking towards the coast of England. On the other side, what do you see looking off the other side?
You can see the Farne Islands, which are a cluster of islands a bit further down the coast, and then a lot of sea.
Exactly. And that's the way the Vikings came, right?
Yeah,
because it's sort of next stop Norway.
Yes, and I think you can still almost get that a bit in the accent. The accent on the island is quite unique. It's a real mixture of Newcastle kind of and northeast and Scottish, and they have their own words and things, and I wonder how much influence from that, I don't know, Scandinavian is in there too.
That's interesting. Do you speak that accent?
No, I had to get a narrator to record the audiobook for me because I've tried, and when I went to school there, everyone used to say I instead of yes when you did the register. And for me, with my very obvious southern accent, it was so embarrassing. So I just used to go, when they call my name.
It's great that you mentioned the accent, because for people listening who aren't English or from the UK, it's not that far. Like from where I am in Bath and you're in Cornwall. I mean, this is in our country and you can get there, let's say, 5 or 6 hours train journey, I would think. And I was there and I also felt like an outsider with my accent. I was like, and also I didn't really understand some of what people were saying, which really shocked me. I just wasn't expecting that.
No, it's so different. I mean, people used to talk about a muckle-bari gadgie, which would mean a very attractive young man. But it's just a whole set of words I'd never heard of, and there's quite a lot of examples like that. It makes it a very unique place, I think.
I think that's right. I mean, you said there you were at school there, you lived there as a child. Tell us a bit about that. What do you remember from that time?
So I moved there when I was 14, and I lived there till I was 18, and I was there with my younger sister and brother. So my memories are in 2 categories, either extremely positive or extremely negative. I think with the passage of time, you tend to forget the boring moments in your life, but living there were no boring moments. It was either brilliant or terrible. And the good bits were amazing. The freedom of living somewhere like that. I mean, we'd come from a city, so there we had our door open all the time. People would just come in and out as they wanted to. We could go off in the morning and my mum was fine with us coming back late at night. My brother was 7, so for him especially to have that freedom was really incredible. It's for a relatively short period in my life, it's probably the most significant group of years, I would say, because it's such a unique experience to live somewhere like that. Not just the remoteness, but everything that comes with island life.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. So the freedom, you said, and the safety of being there, and I guess the natural side of things. But as a teenager, between the ages of 14 and 18, I mean, what were some of those negatives?
Well, I think the main negative was when we weren't on the island. So there's a primary school there, and when we first arrived there, all the national press came up because my brother was the only pupil in the school, and it was in all the papers that he was saving the island school. But for me and my sister, we would be picked up on a Monday morning outside our house with our suitcases, and we'd be taken to a hostel in Berwick-upon-Tweed, the nearest town, and we would be there and then till the taxi came on Friday afternoon to take us home. So we effectively had to leave home, and it wasn't like being in a boarding school where you'd have all that support. There were 2 wardens, but they had their own flats, you didn't really see them. And it was a building that had been built for 30 to 40 kids, but by the time we were there were only 5 of us. So there were whole sections of this building that was shut off. And actually, it was so bad that we were the last kids to be part of that setup. After us, they changed the system, so kids would go to a local boarding school where they'd have all that support and
do all that. Well, I mean, really what you're talking about, it sounds like the middle of nowhere. And that's what's so interesting, right? Because Northumberland really does have a lot of remote areas, but it feels like, you said Berwick-on-Tweed, it's not that far to Edinburgh from there, so you weren't in the middle of nowhere. But coming back to the island itself, so you mentioned island life. What does island life mean?
I think it means very different things depending on why you're there, which group you fall into. So there's obviously the religious community there, and we were there because my dad was a church minister, and he was sent there there was a church which had no members anymore, and his job was to turn it into a visitor centre. So we fell between these 2 groups where you had the religious community, and then you had the everyday islanders who would work in hospitality or fishing or all sorts of other things. So I think within this one very small community, people are living extremely different experiences. And as a teenager, we were removed from some of the politics within the community, and the best times were in the holidays when other kids, like grandchildren of islanders, would come and stay, or holiday makers. And suddenly you'd have friends and you'd have people to hang around with. But it also meant the times that they weren't there, we were with people of all ages. I think it gave us lots of skills in later life to be able to relate to people, not just our peers, because we'd be going to these music groups with people in their 60s and, from all different backgrounds and things like that. So it's, I think a very small community, but lots of different lifestyles within it.
And so for your book, Silver Darlings, why did you want to revisit the island, and what community aspects did you bring in for that book?
I wanted to revisit it. First of all, I started off with a memoir and writing about my experiences of living there as a teenager. But so much happened to our family. We went there as what I considered a very strong family unit, and left as a broken family. My parents had separated, and so we all left separately. So I realised I couldn't do anything with it. It was too personal. But I still wanted to capture that feeling of being a young person on the island. And then I started looking into the fishing heritage, because the Celtic Christianity and everything is so famous, and so many people go there on pilgrimage to experience that and the history. But there's this whole period where the entire island was focused on fishing, and everyone on the island was part of that community. And it was far more cohesive as a community than I think it probably is or certainly was when I was living there. And I really wanted to, I suppose, experience myself through these characters, what that side of it would have been like, and how all these. So I had people I knew in mind. Like there's this lovely old fisherman called Eddie who was just a wonderful island character, and I had people like him in mind while I was telling this historical story. But I suppose it was a way as well of me revisiting this place that I loved so much, that had been so important to me, that I couldn't tell through my own story, but I could inhabit these fictional characters and tell it through theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, the personal side of memoir is tough, and I understand that. I mean, it's interesting. And obviously, we don't need to get into why your family broke up, but one of the nightmares that I feel as someone who is an urban city girl, I mean, I love being in nature, but I want to know I'm coming back to the city. I like to be able to walk to a bookshop and some restaurants and coffee shops and all that. And when I was on the island just one night, I was like, this is fantastic, but sort of, oh my goodness, it's so small, and everyone would know your business and everybody would know everyone. And like you said, the positive is it's safe and people will look out for you, but the negative is, like, really, there's no privacy, there's no way of being different. A lot of people say island life is quite insular and people want to stop you from being different, and so to be different you have to leave. And so is that something you recognise?
Yeah, definitely that feeling of lack of privacy. And I think because we had such an open house as well, there were people, like even when my parents went away for a week and I was there on my own, people were wandering in
Pop
and out
in.
of my house. And everybody knows everything that's going on. And as a teenager, sometimes you want to let loose a bit, but you can't really, because there'll be someone there watching you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. Okay, so you mentioned the religious side of the community and the Celtic side. A lot of people won't know the history, so maybe just tell us a bit about that.
So it's a very famous site of Celtic Christianity. I think it was about AD 600 and something. King Oswald of Northumberland invited Aidan, Saint Aidan now, and some other monks from the Scottish island of Iona to come and set up a monastery on the island. And it just became an incredibly important Christian site for spreading Christianity throughout the kingdom of Northumberland. And then so Aidan became bishop of the island, and then after him St Cuthbert became the bishop. And I think it was during St Cuthbert's time that the Lindisfarne Gospels were written, which are very famous, illustrated, incredibly beautiful, unique pieces of artwork. And people came on pilgrimages, and St Cuthbert is still very much celebrated. The church that my dad was turning into a visitor centre is called St Cuthbert's, and there's St Cuthbert's Island. I don't know if you would have seen it when you're near St Mary's Church. You go down to the beach and there's an island off the island, and that's
it's got a little cross on, I think.
Yeah. So sometimes people will go there and sit a tide out on that tiny island and just contemplate. So it was a really, really important site. And then the Vikings came and destroyed the lot, everything that had been there. And then later, I think during the Norman conquest, they set up a priory on the island, so that you can still see the remains of that now. You can walk around the ruins of the priory. So it still has that legacy of being extremely important in the spread of Christianity.
Yeah.
And I guess the sacrifice of those monks who were raided, and it was one of the first documented Viking raids, I think, was on the island.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting history, and like we said, it's kind of the first place you would land. You come over and you hit Lindisfarne, and you would see what was a rich pilgrimage centre, and the monks had money, and obviously you're going to go raid it. That's what you're going to do. But yeah, the St Cuthbert's Way, which is part of the pilgrimage I walked. Yeah, fantastic walk from where he started in Melrose in Scotland. And for people who don't know, his relic, part of his body is still in Durham Cathedral. Part of me thinks it should be on Lindisfarne, but it just wouldn't cope with the number of visitors, I guess.
No, I think it would be logistically tricky. I mean, it's a miracle that they managed to get him and also the Gospels and things out and down to Durham, because the Vikings, it wasn't just one raid, was it? They kept coming back. And I think there is a lot lost, a lot of important historical things and money and property and all sorts, but to have saved St Cuthbert and the Gospels was quite remarkable, really. Yeah.
And you can go to a cave where supposedly his body rested overnight. And it's interesting, of course, because we're not Catholic anymore. This is not a Catholic country, and your dad would not have been Catholic, and the church now on Lindisfarne is not Catholic, and yet that's where it all came from. And I find it quite funny sometimes, this discussion of relics and the body of Cuthbert and all of that, when it's like, that's not quite what the religion is anymore. So how do you think that was dealt with, this sort of Catholic history and the modern, which there is a spiritual sense now, isn't there? I almost say it's beyond Christian, it's sort of spiritual.
I think it is. I think a lot of people coming there now come for a much broader spiritual feeling. And the Catholic side is still, there is a small Catholic church on the island, and there are like big services and pilgrimages at Easter, for example. But I think it's not, the Catholic side of it is far less dominant. It's far more about the spirituality and Celtic Christianity, it's almost a brand is perhaps the wrong word, but I think in recent years Celtic Christianity and spirituality has really become far more popular outside of its Catholic origins, I think. And there is a feeling you get from, I think you mentioned a thin place in pilgrimage, didn't you? And that would often be mentioned when I was living there. This is how it felt like a thin place. And we would have people come and stay with us who were extremely rational people, who would never go in for anything, otherworldly, who would have experiences there or feel certain strong feelings that would not they'd never experienced anywhere else before. And whether it's partly being cut off twice a day, or whether it's the history, I don't know what it is, but there is something almost intangible, but you just feel it when you're there. It's quite special.
So do you have any feelings of that thin place? Are there any experiences that you would look back on as that, or did you get that sense?
I think I got that through the natural beauty of it. So although I was raised in a city, I've always been far happier in the countryside. And it was when I would go off exploring, and I would go on the North Shore and just walk, and this long sandy beach, and that's when I would feel that sense of something special, not when I was in a church, or because actually often there are squabbles between like the religious communities, and there was a human side that wasn't always that nice. But when I was out in nature, and you get these huge wide skies on the island, and that's when I would feel it. And it definitely, it does something to you. I think especially if you're on your own. And I would go off, I wasn't a very typical teenager, funnily enough, living on an island. But I would just go off for hours walking on my own or on my bike. And yes, you feel this, I don't know, the thin place, I suppose.
And is that God for you? Was it God back then? Is it God now, or is it something broader?
I think back then it would have been far more straightforward for me that it would have been God. I think now I really don't know. I don't really subscribe to organised religion these days, but I
Nor
still,
me.
despite having grown up in it, but I still experience that spiritual feeling when I am somewhere beautiful, or when I'm swimming in the sea. That's a time I'll get that. Whew, kind of feeling that you can't really name, but you feel surely there's got to be a creator to have made somewhere so magical.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, obviously, my book Pilgrimage being about these pilgrimages and yet not being a Christian, and yet also a lot of the feelings the same as you. And one of the times I really felt it, and I still like get goosebumps even right now thinking about it, when I crossed over to Lindisfarne, walking over the sands, and it really was one of the most spiritual moments, I think, of my life. There was a sound and I didn't know what it was, and then I realized it was the seals singing, and there's a lot of seals in that channel.
Yeah.
And of course it's a bird sanctuary, so there are so many birds, and you're following. And I had my back to the road. There is a road, but I had my back to the road and I was kind of trying to ignore it. But there, as you know, there are these white poles leading you across the sand to the island. And I just felt this, I think this timelessness of how many other feet have walked this, how many pilgrims, the monks. I mean, there's at least 1800 years of history, but before that there would have always been islanders, people living on that island. And so that was kind of a moment that it really hit me. So yeah, tell us a bit more about the nature of the island, or any aspects of that nature reserve and all of that.
I think it's what I love most about it is, especially when the causeway's open, the village will be packed, and the ruined priory will be packed, and there are people everywhere. And you can walk to the castle and walk along, or you go down a little farm track and there's nobody. And my favourite place would be to go to the sand dunes, and there's little pools among the sand dunes as well. I did used to get chased occasionally in the sand dunes, which wasn't such a relaxing experience by other island kids.
White island kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when I was on my own, you've got these massive expanses of sand dunes, and then you climb, and you've got these huge stretches of beach, and you've got the seals, and you've got all the birds. There's a bird hide that you can go and just spend hours watching, really. So you've got the coast all around, and then you've got these little pools and the nature reserve and the birds, and it's just in a place where there's quite a lot of people and chaos packed into one corner, just this wide expanse, and to be able to just walk and see seals just sunbathing, or just spend a time sitting on a sand dune and just watching all the birds go around you is really, really special. And it's something that never grew old. I think sometimes you can live in a beautiful place and you stop seeing it, but I think there you never stop seeing it. You're always aware that just down the end of a path you're going to have this open space where you can just breathe and experience a bit of peace, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think Northumberland also is one of the areas of dark sky, the dark sky areas where you can actually see the stars without so much light pollution. So I'm not sure if it's not on Lindisfarne, but just within that national park. Yeah, when I was walking out that way, and on that beach looking out to sort of Norway, there's lots of rock cairns. When I went, people had built rocks up in piles. And then as I was walking back, I saw a murmuration of, I guess it was one of the swifts or something. When I always think, when you see a murmuration, and for people listening, if you don't know, it's when all the birds kind of flock in patterns and they make patterns in the air. And when I've seen them, I saw them at Stonehenge as well. And that was, again, one of those moments of like,
incredible.
Yeah, it was like, okay, there's definitely something, again, that thin place, and you feel just part of nature, and it puts life in perspective when you just stop for a moment and you notice that you're part of this, a human in nature. And the morning I got up and I had my coffee in a little flask and watched the seals in the water. And it's so funny because I was only there for one night, and I think about going back a lot, and yet I'm kind of worried about going back because it was so perfect. That 24 hours or whatever it was that I was there. So have you been back? Like, do you go back? Has it changed your mind since?
Yes, I didn't go back for a very long time. I went So when did I leave? I left in 2000. I did go back while I was at uni to stay with some friends once, but for a couple of nights. And then I didn't go back again till 2008 when I had my son as a baby. But literally, I think because so much happened there, it is quite a hard place to go back to. So I went back on the island, had a quick walk around and left again. And then it was last year I finally felt ready to properly go back again, and it was just me and my two sons, and they were the ages me and my sister were when we moved there, and I took them up there, and it was incredibly healing. Going there reminded me of all the things I loved about it, and seeing it through their eyes. So I've got a picture of them standing on top of these really tall sand dunes, just like with their arms in the air cheering, and seeing how much they loved it and hearing them say, wow, this must have been an amazing place to live. And it was I'm so pleased I did it. I mean, it was a beautiful sunny day. We were meant to stay on the island, and then there was a flood where we were staying, so we had to stay on the mainland. And I was quite pleased in a way, because we spent 2 days there, but we could retreat at the end of the day, and I could just process all these things. And on the second day, I went and actually saw some people I'd known when I was there, and just felt at peace in this place, and showed the boys where we used to live, and showed them where my brother went to school. And it was, so I'm really pleased I did go back. Me and my sister are talking about going back together at some point, but it's a very, very long way from Cornwall.
It is, yeah. Cornwall itself is very big. I mean, compared. Well, it is interesting, isn't it? Revisiting these places that mean so much. I mean, I also feel like the situation I was in, which was I was recovering. It was it was still the pandemic. I was still sick. Like, I was in a lot of pain, and it was a real struggle. And so I did feel like, and so often the end of a pilgrimage is there's a real letdown, because the journey is kind of the point. And yet when I crossed over, it just felt so magic. But let's give some people some real practical tips, because hopefully now everyone's like, oh my goodness, I really want to go to Lindisfarne. But let's talk about the crossing and the practicalities. So if people want to drive or they want to walk, what do they need to be aware of?
You have to check the tide times. There are lots of places online that you can check when it's safe to cross, and absolutely do not risk it. As teenagers, one of our sports, word would spread that a car was stuck on the causeway, and we go down on our bikes and laugh. You don't want that happening to you if you go. So be really careful to only cross when the internet or the sign by the side of the road tells you it's safe to cross. There is a rescue tower. You can go up halfway if you do get stuck, but that is not...
It's not for cars.
Fun to go up and have a look, but you don't want your car to be submerged and you're waiting for the RNLI to come and get you. So yeah, make sure to check the tide times. And it is worth being there, I think, over a tide, because it's when the tide closes, it's such a different experience. So if the tides work out that you can spend a few hours there with the tide in, that's definitely worth doing. But yeah, be very careful crossing, whether on foot or in a car.
Yeah, I didn't know whether I would be able to walk across, because the other thing is the weather, right? I mean, I was there and it was beautiful. I just had the most perfect crossing with the sun. But talk a bit about the mist and the rain and the weather up there.
Oh, I have a memory. There was a year where I think it was May, and we knew that it was a beautiful May weather everywhere else, but it was just misty, and it was misty every single day in May. My birthday's in May, which is probably why I also remember it so clearly, and it gets really depressing when you go out of your house and it's cold. You know, everywhere else the sun is shining, but it's cold. You can only see a couple of meters in front of you. It's mentally very challenging, I think, because you feel so cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah, and you can't see the coast, even though that's the thing. I think that's the mist is not just a light mist that disappears. It's like you can't actually see the land. And that's when you can get lost. Yeah, And there are stories, obviously, of people trying to walk across and then just ending up missing the poles, that kind of thing. And in fact, a lot of people, when I said I was walking across, they said, "Oh no, don't do that. It's too dangerous."
There's some quicksand, isn't there, or sinking sand. You have to be very careful to stick to the right route.
You have to stick to the route. And if it's nice weather, you can see the route all the way across. And you're like, why is everyone going on about this? But of course, the mist, I think. So what I would say to people is, as you said as well, the tide moves every day. The tide times move every day. If people don't know that, it's not the same time every single day. And so you really do have to be ready to cross and then come back. Also, we should say it is very small. You have to, if you want to stay, you have to book accommodation like way in advance, right?
Yeah. And another thing about crossing, actually, just not to alarm people, but if you are there and it looks safe to cross, but the tide time says it's not, just don't risk it, because it comes so quickly. It looks like the road is clear and then it'll just wash right across. But yes, staying there, you really have to book in advance. But for us, it worked well staying. We stayed in Spittal, which is just outside Berwick-upon-Tweed, so it's about 10 miles away the last time I went. And actually that worked well. But I think if you've never been before, I think it's staying on the island is quite a unique experience and well worth doing if you can.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's well worth it. And also, if you just go across when everyone else does, like when it was so funny, I walked off the sand. I only saw a couple of other people walking, and I sat down to put my shoes on. And then I walked along the road and around the corner, and there's like a coach park.
Yeah.
With like hundreds of people streaming off the coaches. And I'm like there with my backpack, and I'm like, whoa, okay. So it can be quite a very touristy experience or a spiritual experience, I suppose. Yeah, either way.
And so much of that is how you time it, I think.
Yes. Yeah, so I definitely think you have to do research. So what I did with the research was, because I wanted to cross, I looked at the dates when I could walk across on the tide and book accommodation, and then I worked backwards from there to when I needed to start the pilgrimage.
That is very organised.
Yeah, I am very organised. But I mean, yeah, I think it's really important. We should also just say just something about the food, because I had the best like fish soup I've ever had in Berwick-on-Tweed. Seriously, I've never had a better. I guess some would call it chowder, but tell us about. I mean, you've mentioned the fishing, I suppose, but the fish is really good, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, it probably depends on the time of year, but there always used to be plenty of places to get a fresh crab sandwich.
Oh yes, I had one of those too.
Yeah, so that's definitely worth trying. And there are so many, not so many, but there are hotels on the island where you can eat with plenty of fish on offer, and I'm assuming that they use, I worked in a hotel when I was there many, many years ago, and they served a lot of lobster, because lobster and crab are caught off the island. So yeah, it's definitely worth trying some of the local cuisine. And of course there's the Mead, the Lindisfarne.
Oh yes, tell us more about the Mead.
I think that was a drink the monks had, I think, and it's made from honey, but it's very, very strong. So yeah, be careful, but you can sample it in the Mead shop.
Yes.
It's very strong alcohol and very sweet. So it's not something I'd probably go for now, because I don't really like sweet things, but something I wouldn't give to my teenage boys, because they'd probably
knock it back.
Yeah.
Yes, tourist Mead, yeah, absolutely. But definitely visit the ruins of the priory there and the church. No, it's a wonderful time. Well, I think we could talk about this forever, but this is the Books and Travel podcast. So what are a few books about Lindisfarne or Northumberland that you recommend?
Well, the first, I know not everyone will be seeing this on video, but I thought I would show. My husband bought this for me, which is the Lindisfarne Gospels.
Oh, lovely.
And it's a British Library guide. And this is just gorgeous. It's got beautiful images of the Lindisfarne Gospels. So that's a really good one.
And just on that, people can see, sometimes they can see the Lindisfarne Gospels at the British Library in London, but it's all online as well. So if you're like, oh, I'd like to see more detail, it is online. But that looks like a lovely book.
They are exceptional. It's definitely worth having a look. And then fiction-wise, I'm absolutely obsessed with Anne Cleeves, who does the Vera and Shetland books, but her Vera series is all set in Northumberland. There is one on the island, I think it's called The Rising Tide or something, but she manages to capture that open-skied beauty of the county, whilst also, I think, shining a light on what it's like to live in one of the communities there. And because often the seaside towns are quite poor, and so yeah, I'd recommend any of her Vera series. And then these aren't strictly books, but if you go on the Islandshire archives, there's information there about the fishing history of the island, which is so interesting. And there's articles by, I think she's called Katrina Porteous, who's done this study of fishing and how the whole community was involved. And then my last recommendation would be the British Newspaper Archive, where you can search a place going back hundreds of years and get a glimpse into what life was like there. And if you search Holy Island, there are reports of things like weddings where they have unique customs, like jumping over a petting stone, and they still do these today. All the fishermen stand with their guns and the bride and groom walk through the guns and they shoot them in the air, and that's all reported. So I think if you're going to visit anywhere, probably in the UK, and you want a slice of what real life is like, it's worth going on the British Newspaper Archive. Just select a random year like 1953 or something and see what was happening.
And have a look.
I think maybe I'm just really nosy.
I think that, to be fair, I've never done that. But and just tell us a bit about Silver Darlings if people would like to read that.
So Silver Darlings is really it's about two young people who grow up on the island in the early 1900s, and for separate reasons they're both forced to leave the island, and they follow the herring trade down the east coast of England to Lowestoft. And they reach the time of the First World War, and it's about whether they can find each other and whether they can find their way back to the island. And it's really about, what does it mean to be home? What does home mean to you? And yeah, they both have very different ideas about whether the island is or isn't home and why. It's a historical romance, but I love social history and ordinary lives and the herring girls and how women had a bit of independence when it was quite hard to do that. So yeah.
Oh well, that sounds great, but now I have to ask you. I was going to finish, but home, I get obsessed. No, I get obsessed with the idea of home, because I also struggle with it. And you've talked about how much you love Lindisfarne, but you're now in Cornwall, so where is home for you?
That's a question I think about all the time, and I think I try and find the answer through my books. So my books are either set on Holy Island in Norwich, where I was born, or in Cornwall or something. And I think through writing them, I'm trying to figure out, where do I actually belong? I really don't know. I mean, Cornwall's where I've lived the longest now, but I know I'll never be Cornish, because you have to be about 5 generations in to be Cornish. Norfolk's where I was born, where a lot of my family are from, but I haven't lived there for over 20 years. And Holy Island is such a special place to me, but I don't sound like I'm from there. I wasn't born there. I almost don't feel I have the right to call it home. So I suppose, I don't know. I still haven't figured out the answer to that.
No, nor me, although I've decided I am English, so perhaps you're English too.
Well, except my brother recently did a DNA test, and it turns out we're also quite Welsh. So
yeah, to be fair, I'm also Scottish and Irish, so but yeah. So there we go. Well, where can people find you and your books online?
So lkwilde.com, you can find out all about me, and then I'm on social media, the usual: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Just search LK Wilde and I will pop up everywhere.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time, Laura. That was great.
Thank you for having me.